I still don't know when exactly my streams start going live. I have two cellular connected devices next to me to make sure that it works, but for some reason they still aren't activating. OBS and YouTube just don't communicate as quickly as they should. 30 seconds delays. I have no idea why this can go so long. Okay, so one device is now showing up. I hope that everything is working now for everybody. I might cut off the beginning depending on how well the stream goes, but regardless. Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Mark Tech. This has been a long time in the making. This is me fully unleashed. This is me in maximum sort of Apple sheep mode, but also criticizing Apple, kind of showing you that I can be neutral. This is me being super excited for something new, but also really, really cautious about not going too far with all this. So you will basically see Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde behavior here. I hope the video works well. I hope the audio works well. I hope I don't drop anything like last time. It's gonna get a little loud right now as I get ready with my Coke. Because this is gonna be at least a half-hour stream, and I think substantially longer than that. Now we are going right to the Vision division of Apple's website. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mark Tech. This is my video in defense of Apple Vision Pro. Now, why does Apple Vision Pro even need a video like that? And the answer to that is pretty simple. It's its price tag. And because it's a new kind of device. Because while we've had AR and VR headsets for a while, quite honestly, there is so much different about this one. You can really classify it similar to how the Apple Watch definitely wasn't the first smartwatch, and in terms of overall form factor might be even very comparable to the smartwatches that came out a year or even two before the Apple Watch. But it did so much stuff differently, and it had such a clear vision in terms of user interface and its form factor, its overall design. Now a lot of it has matured and changed over time, as it should for now basically almost a decade later. However, there also is a part that is still integral to the Apple Watch that makes it instantly recognizable and makes it unique still in the industry. And I think that Apple Vision Pro achieves that and then some, to be honest. But it does that by not being $400 starting like the Apple Watch, by not being even a full grand when you account for contracts and stuff like that, like the original iPhone, and certainly not being actually lower priced than rumors were saying, which was the case for the original iPad, which, if you remember, was rumored to be $800, but then actually was priced at $500. Now that model might have had less storage and no 3G connectivity, but it was still a good device, and it was probably what most people were choosing, especially for the first gen product. So it certainly doesn't replicate the original iPhone or iPad or Apple Watch in terms of pricing, which, while the iPhone was expensive, the iPhone was also not necessarily 6 times as expensive as its smartphone brethren of the time, and it was substantially better, which admittedly this also is substantially better than other VR headsets. But let's get to this. Now, for one, let's start with the design, and the design is something that we see right here. Now, because of how the Apple website works, it also put us into the next mode. Now, on the front, you have curved glass and curved aluminum frame, which sort of with a somewhat protruding digital crown. Yeah, this is very Apple Watch inspired, guys. Like, yes, we are seeing the eyes through here, and I will definitely be getting to that. And of course, there are the cameras here, so there is some extra just sort of blank space. And from the sides, we see everything that goes into the headband that is holding it. But this is very much like Apple Watch inspired. This to me is like this 2.5D like curved glass. Maybe you could even like call this really like 3D with just how curved it is. Well, it doesn't go to the back, right? But it definitely could, right? It's just Apple wanted a more durable material here on the sides. Also like to make the buttons more pronounced. You obviously don't want glass buttons. Here we have like a side button, also similar to the Apple Watch. Of course, the digital crown is something that has migrated from like the Apple Watch to AirPods Max, and now here, and it does sort of different things across all of those devices, which is kind of crazy for Apple, but it also makes sense contextually, so it's really, really difficult to say. And then, of course, part of the design, and I will cover it here because I do think that I have a somewhat different take from others, because those eyes, right, that you can see, now there's been a lot of said about it. And I do agree with a lot of it that has been said, right? It's like meme worthy, it looks a little funny, why is this here? However, I do kind of have to say that those criticisms seem to be coming from people that don't actually use headsets. Because I have a PlayStation VR 2, and it's obviously a completely closed system, right? Even it does have cameras for the outside. Those cameras are only black and white. They aren't that high quality, and I cannot integrate what I see around, what is technically around me, with what I'm seeing on the main display. So basically, I am completely cut off from the outside world. And while that improves immersion, certainly, it also kind of gives you a little bit of a claustrophobic feeling after half an hour or so. If anybody else is in the room, you feel really goofy for being completely cut off from them. And obviously lifting up the headset, granted for a gaming headset, that's obviously if you're taking a break, you will lift it up anyway. But for a device that is more about, first and foremost, general content consumption, which will include movies and stuff like that. A device that is also for productivity and creative tasks. You want to have it longer on your face than 30 minutes, even like 40 minutes. I would say you would probably want to have it on your face for about a full hour. Which then we will get to battery life later on. So there's a lot I'm talking about here. And so these eyes are basically my first thing that I'm in defense of here, right? Because a lot of people are on defense for this. But to me, while I do agree that it doesn't look fantastic, especially in like normal photos, I do believe it's a neat idea, because for now, obviously you are encouraged to look at other people in the environment, but even more importantly, like when you look at them, you also now have a better understanding if they're looking at you, because if they can see your eyes on it, they will be obviously looking at you more directly. Which, if you're looking at sort of like a blank black canvas, I don't know if people are really encouraged to really look at you like they usually do. So I fully understand why this is here. And the other point is why I'm defending this is, of course, we can all say, oh, this looks bad, right? Why is this like so shadowy, and why is this like so sort of gray? Well, for one, it's taking an image and a slight 3D like rendering approach to your eyes inside this, and your eyes are obviously inside darkness, and you get light on it from the main screen, and there are some imperceptible LEDs in there. However, this looks already good for being basically taken in a very, very dark environment, but obviously that doesn't excuse how it looks until you consider the last piece of the puzzle, which is that this is part of like an elaborate like 3D approach together with the curved glass. So it basically looks appropriate to from whatever angle somebody else looks at you, right? We are obviously looking up, we're looking at this up front, but this will not be the case. Like, imagine somebody sitting diagonally from you from another couch. That's how my living room is set up. Or imagine somebody's just at your side, right? And basically is just leaning over to look at you quickly. You want those eyes to at least look like that from whatever perspective the other person is taking. Now, I don't know how well Apple succeeds at that, and I've seen some mixed reports on this right now, so I'm obviously not defending it as like a perfect decision, and certainly not like a perfect implementation. However, anybody who says that this is completely useless, this is coming from people who don't have a good perspective on the general public. And we will get to the price that obviously prohibits the general public from accessing it. But if you want this to really go mainstream, this awkwardness of like this kind of not like a little bit uncanny valley eyes, I would say, this is still better than just a black canvas, because this can be a black canvas if you want, or this can be like this rainbow pattern that Apple has shown whenever you are like completely immersed and not looking at the outside. Also, like a front screen to a degree will be necessary regardless. Now, does it need to be like a high quality OLED screen with this like 3D glass pattern? Well, if it's a $3,500 device, yeah, I certainly hope it's the most high-end device. But whenever Apple makes like a $1,000 or even like $1,500 headset, you would still want something that, for example, shows to other people when you're taking a picture or a video. Privacy and security are very important to Apple, so obviously it matters that the device is not creepy. And yes, there is some creepiness to it, but I guarantee you it's way more creepy if you cannot see somebody and and the device basically doesn't give you a guarantee that you aren't currently being recorded. So there is a big thought behind this. Is it perfectly executed? Most likely not. I do think it's well executed for what it is, and I don't honestly imagine how much better it could get without like going super expensive, like even more expensive and even more battery consuming. I kind of assume that this screen is also like very much tuned for like low energy consumption, because otherwise the screen would just because the battery would be absolutely destroyed, especially if you're also like displaying like those rainbow patterns on there. But yeah, I don't hate it as much as others, but I'm also, like others, a little apprehensive about it. So let's go a little further. Now I am scrolling with my mouse, so I apologize for it being a little weird. There definitely won't be any sound for me, because anything with sound, Apple just like shuts down. So this is interesting because this sort of introduces us to the overall OS a little bit. Now you just put it on, you stay in your environment, so it is augmented reality first and foremost. We will let it loop one more time until I click pause. This is definitely more a video to watch and not just to listen. Okay, so here's basically our home screen. Now, didn't we have like a high quality image here? Okay, good. So Apple calls this spatial computing. Now, spatial computing is actually a really good name. And I have to kind of say, after like living for years with like Apple Reality Pro, which, by the way, Apple Reality Pro, the problem with anything that is called Apple Reality, this will instantly become a meme about like Apple's reality distortion field. So this was already then there was like rumors about the operating system being called XROS. Again, the X wouldn't actually mean anything, right? And R stands for reality, and that's, for example, why the coprocessor in this is called the R1. It's because it's real-time handling, very important data coming in. But I have to say, like, Vision Pro, just the even on their website they call it Vision, right, where they have like a Mac, an iPad, and iPhone stuff. There's now a Vision stuff, and I have to kind of say that's a great name. Like, it's really self-explanatory. Like, yes, Apple could have called it Apple Virtuality or something like that, but if you wanted to encompass it in one word, plus Pro, because obviously it needs to be Pro at that price. Yeah, I really like Apple Vision as the name, Apple Vision Pro, and I like Vision OS as the name for the operating system. Now, what is interesting, because if you look at those icons, right, there are some things you might be asking, like, why is there so much blank space here, and why do they look somewhat so similar to like the Mac versions or like the iPhone versions, or sort of like a mix in between them when you look at like the settings app? I have a really good answer for that, actually, partially because I have a PlayStation VR 2 now. And that is because eye controls, like eye tracking technology, really doesn't work well when it requires you to look. Like, if you had some content here, you would basically be encouraged not to like move your actual eyes, but to move your head to look at that. I sometimes see that in like games that get somewhat lazy ports on PlayStation VR 2, that basically like they don't encourage me to track my eyes, they encourage me to move my head. And that obviously doesn't work, because it still isn't like fully spatially integrated into the environment. This is spatially integrated into the environment. This is also where your sharpest view is anyway. So this will work very, very well like this. Now, the icons themselves, this is one of Apple's first, like, except for the Apple Watch, like, they're like circular app icons. I don't know if I love that, though they do look minimalist and really good for the most part. I don't like this compatible apps thing, because it makes this look empty, even though, as I said, it makes sense why there are few icons on display at one time. But this makes it look like, oh, how many apps will there actually be here? Like 2 or 3 more? No, I think there will be way more, especially down the line. And like, they have Keynote here, but obviously anything that has Keynote in Apple's universe also has like pages and numbers. So I wouldn't really worry about it. Even like it has messages here, and Apple has shown you that it has FaceTime. So I don't actually think that this first image does it justice. Even like notes in freeform, like, oh, okay, like it's not like this is going to be the primary use case for this device. So yeah, this is why I think it works, because it is in your like central field of vision. It will work really well with the much praised eye tracking technology. Like, I just watched MKBHD's video on it, and he's saying like the eye tracking is basically magic, and it's already pretty good on PSVR 2, so I kind of imagine that this will be even better. So it seamlessly blends digital content with your physical space. Now, this is obviously like basically a quick overview of augmented reality. And it's kind of cool that Apple right off the gate is like showing you Safari, because, well, obviously browsers are good for virtual reality headsets. Right, guys? No, but seriously, because it opens up new use cases, and it makes it instantly feel like less close down to something like the Apple TV or even like the Apple Watch. It gives you this feeling that this is basically an iPad on your head. And I'm saying an iPad because the iPad was always about this singular piece of glass that immerses you as much as possible for a portable device still. Well, this is now a wearable device, like sort of the ultimate wearable, because it gets as close to interacting with our brain directly as it gets until we start talking about like brain implants, which I honestly don't want. So having Safari here, because as Steve Jobs said when he had the original iPhone introduction in 2007, was when he was showing somebody and he was like showing them scrolling through like the phone and like context app and stuff like that, and then somebody said to him after the end of the presentation, "You had me at scrolling." And I think nothing shows scrolling better and zooming and stuff like that than the web, because on images, yes, you can sort of move around them, you can zoom around in them. But when it comes to like really like swiping through different tabs, swiping up and down through one web page, but also ultimately like just swiping up with your hand like that, right? From whatever position you want, unless it's behind you. But Apple has like front-facing cameras and down-facing cameras, so hand recognition is really good. So the fact that you aren't even like precisely like pointing your finger at something like directly, but you can just sort of flick up and down, and then you can directly interact it whenever you need to, when you want to tap on something precise, and then your eyes help you find what you are looking for. And the fact that it doesn't have like any like visual artifacts from everything that I'm seeing, like the screen is incredibly high quality, like it's 64 pixels for every iPhone pixel. This means it has 8 times higher pixel density. That is insane. Now obviously it needs that because the anti-aliasing will have to do a lot of work here, because it's like it's directly in front of you, right? There is no level of like retina calculation that is helping you here, because as you know, when Apple showed it, like retina display refers to a typical viewing distance, the pixels disappear. Well, now there is basically no viewing distance, it's right there. And I think that Apple rightfully focused on that, though it will be interesting to see how an M2 handles, like I believe it's a 24 megapixel like overall like screen altogether. It's like 2 panels that are both beyond 8 megapixels, which would be 4K, but those screens are more square. This is why I don't like using 4K, because usually 4K is 3840 by 2160, and this is obviously a very different aspect ratio. So this is how it works, but now there are obviously different levels of immersion here, right? They are saying it integrates directly into your environment, and that obviously can refer to your environment also changing. And for example, you can be immersed into basically being somewhere entirely differently, or you just make whatever is around you darker so that your content is more pronounced. And to me, like obviously this idea of then like having like 100-foot screen in front of you or something like that, or God knows, maybe even larger, and then there's like this cool like reflection effect in the water if you choose to maybe like watch it on the mountainside. That is so cool. Like, I understand it's expensive, and I do, for example, I have like a $2,000 TV. I use my 400 euro HomePod as its audio output. I would like to get a second HomePod to have like full stereo. So I fully understand the cost that would usually go into a fully immersive like visual experience. But when you try to make this price comparison, it works if you're really focused on one individual consuming content, but it becomes a very, very different proposition if you are using this like as a home theater, right? Obviously you cannot use this as a home theater setup, but you can use any good 55, 65, 77 inch screen for that. Hell, you can even go lower and cheaper with that. Like you can have like a nice speaker setup for like $300 to $500, and that's a nice one. You can get a soundbar for 150. So obviously, if you're trying to say like, oh, everybody in your family has it, like let's say like a 3-person household, even though we will also get to the fact that there's like an age requirement for this, and I do like this because to anybody who watched the keynote, Apple was just talking about like nearsightedness, and they conveniently didn't mention that smartphone usage. They said like device usage makes that happen, and because of the difference you hold your device. But yeah, that's kind of the smartphone, right? And Apple is kind of responsible for that. And they were talking about it, and they were making some really good points about it, and then immediately they were going to a device afterwards that was like primarily focused on you having like screens like 3 centimeters in front of you. I understand it works differently because of the lenses, but still it's simply not a good look. So it's really, really good that Apple is then saying that there's like an age requirement here. I don't actually remember what precisely it was. I think I will look it up just so to be sure. I'll do it on my phone so I don't interrupt our very immersive viewing experience. Okay, it's 13 and older. Now, that obviously will also have something to do with the overall size of the head. And I kind of wish it was maybe like 16, because at 16 your eyes are mostly developed. And like, well, the eyes are also... Sorry, guys. When I talk excited, my throat gets all dry. Taking a drink. It's not that your eyes aren't fully developed by the age of 13, but at least if you like start doing a lot of like device consumption at 13, then your risk of developing, for example, nearsightedness is then way higher than if you start at 16 or 18. But obviously most kids now grow up with an iPad right in front of their face. So yeah, this was a tangential issue that I think it's good that this isn't aimed at like 6-year-old kids, right? At least that part is like true. So you've never seen anything like that, and now we go to the Apple Vision Pro. God, I wish I could watch all of this content, but I really don't think that jives with like Apple's rules for like how you can stream basically Apple related content. I don't know why it's loading in. It just had no problems showing that before. Oh, okay, it's very high resolution imagery. And guys, I do have all the betas already installed because I do plan on making a lot of content reacting to all of this. I will still use the same format, but whenever I mention something, I could now show you a screenshot of something that I have seen that I liked, or something that hasn't changed yet, or something that isn't maybe just isn't there yet. So, but I will also wait for like Zolotext videos on it so that I don't give you any false information. So this is the video for today, and I think it's also probably the most important one. So let's start with the enclosure. They say it's a singular piece of 3-dimensionally formed laminated glass that flows into an aluminum alloy, into an aluminum alloy frame that gently curves to wrap around your face. Yeah, that sort of makes sense. That's what I've reacted to when we were also talking about like the eyes shining through. We see the cameras here, so they are kind of pronounced, but obviously better than like on a white headset when you have like black dots. I love the curve here, and I think curves always look like both enticing and sort of bad in like 2D imagery, like once a photo is just taken, because it kind of makes it look uneven and stuff like that. But I think in reality, anybody who has had like an Apple Watch Series 7 and 8, for example, like this looks and feels really, really good. Cameras and sensors. There's an array of... Wait, did it upgrade here? Yes. An array of advanced cameras and sensors that work together to let you see the world clearly, understand your environment, and detect hand input. Now, I don't know how much tech specs Apple is mentioning. Overall, it is supposed to have like 12 cameras, including the internal ones that create like that image of your eyes, and then your partially for your face, for the like 3D data here. But here you have like front facing ones, down facing ones, side facing ones, which is also really good for like, imagine like how the iPad zooms in and out depending on if somebody comes into frame, right? Central stage, right? Imagine center stage working not by actually changing your view, because that would be incredibly disorienting, but changing your level of immersion based on somebody coming near you. So if somebody sits right next to you, you obviously you would start to hear it right away. You would feel it if somebody sits down next to you on the couch. But then imagine this camera having already pre-seen that, and having that person show up throughout like the augmented reality experience that you were watching. Or if you were, even more importantly, if you were like in a fully VR environment, so you aren't even looking at your surroundings, and you have like that fake like mountainside backdrop, or if you're at Disneyland or something like that, well, now suddenly that person just shows up quickly, so you know he or she is there, and now you can react to them without being like surprised, and without them being weirded out when you're like having a strange reaction to them showing up because you only saw them last second. This is what makes this, in my eyes, truly an augmented reality headset, and truly a mixed reality headset. We have had stuff like the HoloLens, which obviously is like sort of transparent, stuff like that. But that to me just kills any kind of mixed reality functionality, where like virtual reality in it sucks. And augmented reality, yes, sure, you see everything around you, but now you also have like this difference between like, oh, I'm looking at something in the environment like through the screen, something I'm basically perceiving real time, then there are like light gaps below it, so there's some stuff I see directly with my eyes. This is not the case. Everything you're seeing here is through the cameras, and that's why the cameras need to be really high quality. The cameras, like the overall system, needs to be super low latency, and you need it to be very powerful and smart, so that it dynamically shows you more or less content, both depending on what you want to see. That's why the dial is up there, like the digital crown, that dials in like, am I fully immersed, or am I sort of like fully augmenting just my reality and not covering it up in any way. And I think that like just seeing all of this tech is very, very impressive, and it gives you a feeling of how much thought has gone into this. Next is audio. And audio is something that I will actually be a little critical of, because when I look at this here, I see potential that I don't think was fully utilized, similar how I believe that the Apple Watch should have gotten smart bands. And I think this sort of should be the basis for smart/battery bands on the Apple Vision Pro. So guys, this is not me like mindlessly like hyping up Apple and hyping up this individual product. This is me legitimately talking to you about something that I am absolutely in love with as a concept, but there are some things that feel first generation, some things that feel like still need to be augmented, haha, right? See what I did there? With like accessories and stuff. And stuff that will obviously improve through software as well. So even this individual piece of hardware will still work better over time. And then there's obviously the price, which kills it. Not because I cannot afford to pay $3,500. I paid as much for my MacBook Pro. Actually a little more, but then there was a student discount. But the point behind this is I don't want to reward Apple for putting out the $3,500 device that clearly doesn't cost $3,500 to make, and it clearly doesn't even cost $3,000 to make. A lot of the money that they are charging for is because of the high like research and development cost. It's about building up supply chains for things like this screens, which are basically completely new technology. Like micro OLED hasn't really been used by anybody currently, and Apple even said that it's like Apple Silicon, sort of like the difference with like micro OLED to regular OLED is that it's like printed directly on like the substrate, so it's sort of like a chip in that regard. And I don't know, does that mean that Apple just like took the design from Sony, is paying the money for that, it is manufacturing that now at TSMC? That's the one thing that I wasn't clear of, because obviously Sony also has like its own production sites for like screens and such, but I think a lot of it will still be clear in time. Anybody, if you know it, like what exactly, or even maybe Apple just meant that it's like co-developed and that's why it's like technically like Apple Silicon. But let's get back to the audio, right? I will digress here a lot, but there are those audio pads, and the speakers are positioned close to your ears, delivering rich spatial audio that seamlessly blends with real-world sounds. Now, I will actually start with something extremely positive, which is I love the idea of not having headphones inside your ears, because I am somebody like, I love my AirPods because they're like really lightweight. I barely feel them, which is why I probably would also use them with something like this. But just imagining this being also like in an environment where you're like at home and stuff, it kind of is great to not have to put in headphones. Like they also like, they hurt your ears a little bit over time regardless. They can fall out. However, my question is, was it really worth integrating those and not just pushing people towards AirPods? Because this also costs money. Good speakers eat up battery life. And this extra space here, right? This could have been used for a little bit battery life, right in the device. Okay, let's say we are really firm on not putting any battery into like the head strap. Well, what about the ear strap portion of this? You clearly were happy in putting in some like weight around it. Good speakers don't weigh just a little. So this could have been used for batteries. And even if it wasn't used for batteries, like you could have then had like a battery connector like somewhere here that connect, like basically a smart connector that could connect to a headband that is much heavier and less comfortable, but one that has batteries inside, and now you don't have to wear a cable with you. So I'm really happy that the speakers are there, and this makes it a very, very good standalone product, right? Because it has speakers, it has microphones, it has cameras, it has an identification system through optic ID. It comes with a battery, even though, like, I don't know if it doesn't have any battery inside it, or maybe even something just very small, so that basically if your device like shuts down, maybe you got like disconnected from the external battery, so there are like 5 minutes of battery inside the device. So Again, obviously, I'm trying to stay here as up to date as possible, but some stuff just isn't out there as information yet. And if it has been out there, there's been so much that I haven't yet been able to go through all the noise and find all the good information. So speakers, great that it has it. It makes me a little bit worried about like sound pollution, sort of, because yes, if I'm sitting alone at home and watching a movie through this, that's exactly kind of what I want. Maybe I would want it to connect to like a good quality like external audio setup. But I believe, Apple, that because of how close this is, this will give you a very, very good listening experience. And because it can basically put actual sound into the environment, and it's not just like AirPods Max that are closed around your ears, I also believe that this will be a very immersive spatial audio. I have been blown away by Apple's spatial audio wherever I use it, even on like a singular HomePod that is like several meters away from me. It does sound spatial. And then obviously AirPods Pro, whenever I turn on spatial audio, even if it's just to play around with it, it's always impressive. So I'm really happy that it's here. But there is still the question with like, couldn't we also get like a battery in here to maybe have like an hour of sustained battery life like in the device without like externals? But okay, let's get to the next one. The headband itself. And the headband is something that I personally really, really like here, because it is sort of like those nylon bands for the Apple Watch. It looks really breathable. It has like this rich structure, which even here, like this stuff like increases surface area also for like ventilation. I believe, like, obviously it's not like active cooling and ventilation, but it will like let air through it without being without having actual holes. So, and they describe it as the headband providing cushioning, breathability, and stretch. The fit dial lets you adjust Vision Pro precisely to your headband. That's great. It's I wouldn't say it's similar to how the PlayStation VR does it. Obviously, it also has a dial and stuff like that. But the materials are so different that it's hard to compare it. But I do love that focus on the materials that Apple has. It is actually something where premium isn't always better. A while ago, I bought myself a very premium pair of gaming headphones. They are fully like over ear, like sort of AirPods Max form factor. They're like they were like $380 or something like that. And I tried them on and they felt very comfortable at first, but they had like those leathery cushions, and they became warm and they really collected sweat. And a similar thing, but like with a much more plasticky material, is happening on my PlayStation VR 2 or on my eyes. Now there is a fan inside that kind of mitigates some of the aspects of like having sweat and heat built up in there. But when I look a lot of like leather straps, and especially around the head part, and we'll get to that here, I believe they called it the light shield, the light seal, okay? This nylon-y material that Apple is using, that is perfect. If it's any way comparable to how Apple is like building the cushions, especially like this part that will be pressing directly to your face, right? And everything about this looks also comfortable. But like if it's somewhat comparable to like the cushiony material on the AirPods Max, which I consider the absolutely, like, no questions asked, best material for headphones that I've ever tried. It's so breathable, it's so comfortable, it never gets hot. Again, I don't have a pair of AirPods Max because I don't have much usage of it for like really big headphones. But from every pair that I've used, especially extensively, this is the only one that is actually super comfortable. Like the Sony sort of come close, they are comfortable, but they don't have anywhere near the overall like just put it on and forget it kind of like feeling that AirPods Max have. And this is why I absolutely believe that when Apple says the material is breathable and comfortable, I 100% believe that it is breathable and comfortable. So let's come to the displays. Now, I've already mentioned some features for them, and obviously in this kind of perspective where Apple just shows you photos, we don't get much tech specs, but it's a custom pair of micro OLED displays, and they have more pixels than a 4K TV for each eye to deliver stunning clarity. That is a lot of pixels. I will be very I believe Apple is using also the latest pancake lenses for really the highest quality. Again, it's not like I'm an optical expert, but I know the latest the PlayStation VR 2 uses basically older lenses, and those lenses look good, especially if you really find the perfect angle. But the second you're slightly off, there's some chromatic aberration, stuff like that. So granted, of course, they cost 6 times less, and I'm comparing them a lot, but they are also some of the most premium ones you can get, because imagine if the PSVR 2 had any of the processing power of it, it likely would cost $2,000 at least. So to have it as a comparison just for its OLED panels, and this is now micro OLED, there is a big quality difference here. And the PSVR 2, for comparison, it comes out to a 4K panel overall, but still, I believe overall, so there is a lot more pixels here, regardless. This is more, I believe this here has more pixels per eye than the PSVR 2 has, for basically both eyes. So, the light seal. Yes, this is when we'll get to what I really, really love, and I think that will get not enough love, which is that the light seal gently conforms to your face. It delivers a precise fit while blocking out stray light, and obviously just light from your environment. But I love how this looks and feels. None of that cheaper plastic, because again, when I got back to PSVR 2, it has those plastic ridges so that it sort of conforms to your face, and I have a big nose, so it never does that properly there. I think there will be not enough love just to understand how much Apple is doing to make this comfortable. Now, there were rumors about this being super lightweight, and when I look at this, and when I think that Apple could have made all of this plastic, right? That aluminum frame could be plastic. That 3D curved glass here could be plastic. Apple could have saved half the weight. And by using just cheaper plastic, but they didn't, because they want to create the same premium experience that you're used to. So when you're picking this up and when other people start looking at you, they sort of look like a big Apple Watch and not just a piece of plastic. So while I do believe that there might be an Apple Vision, well, just take out the Pro, right? There will be an Apple Vision. Maybe Apple can call it an Apple Vision Series 1, and this would become the Series 0. And then the Series 1 exists as an Apple Vision and an Apple Vision Pro. Kind of there is the Apple Watch and the Apple Watch Ultra, right? Just with the series stuff. And then the regular one would have well, it might keep the glass, but then replace the aluminum with plastic, and maybe it would have just less glass overall, right? Maybe it would be only glass right here, and then would merge into plastic quicker. I don't know, to be honest. I'm not an engineer. I know all of this costs money. It certainly costs a lot of research and development. However, I wish that some people have said they wish that Apple would take a loss on this. I don't need them to take a loss. I kind of believe that at $2,500 regardless, even while they're building up like because if we are just looking at bill of materials for one individual device, regardless of like any research of and development, because this is hardware, software, services, there are a ton of collaborations that Apple is doing. When I look at like everything, like the overall materials, the processors, the screens, the speakers, I cannot imagine it costing more than still $2,000 to build for the actual device. Quite honestly, I cannot imagine it costing more than $1,500 to build, regardless of anything like regarding a new device. But if I combine that with the R&D, with building up new factories and stuff like that, or basically like new factory processes, like even like training new people and stuff like that, there's like a highly advanced like motherboard supposedly inside that is like curved and stuff like that, which is a completely new technology and can't innovate anymore, my ass, right? So let's say it costs a full $2,000 to build. And even ship, let's say with all the logistics included, it's $2,000. I still believe it's less, but let's say it's $2,000. And then you have to account for the R&D and the factory production, everything else that will also like feed the device category for years to come. I don't see how this should have been more than $3,000. Quite honestly, with wanting to push it to the overall masses, I think $2,500 would have actually been a decent price for a first-gen device that the people are very apprehensive about, because it doesn't even have the latest processor. Now, I will be getting to that part too, partially because I think that there's a lot of hate for it having the M2, and I understand why. But there is a lot of context to how first generation products are built. Like, I think the only real exception that I can think of that has like a very like recent processor in a first gen device is the iPad. The first gen iPad had an A4 chip before the iPhone 4 got that A4 chip. However, that A4 chip by itself was still woefully underpowered to actually run the iPad. It had an abysmal amount of like 256 megabytes of RAM. And especially in terms of graphics power, like that A4 might have been decent for like a lot of CPU tasks, especially if like there's like much multi-threading requirement. But like there's a reason why the A5 chip was 9 times faster in terms of GPU. It's because it was a chip that was also clearly downbuilt with the understanding that there is a big device that needs much more graphical oomph. And then like the iPhone 4S, they could just use the same processor but like 20% lower clocked. That's it, and that's why this uses an M2, because it uses a tried and true chip on a production node that works well. It uses like algorithms on the neural engine and stuff like that that are well understood, that it has the necessary power. But obviously an M3 chip would be much more efficient, even more powerful on the high end, right? If you still decide to clock it somewhat high. It could have like ray tracing technology, so all the lights interacting around you, like Apple said, how like the operating system can cast a shadow into your real environment and stuff like that. That could now be powered by ray tracing and not just like a basic understanding. There's audio ray tracing in the device, right? The speakers work together with the microphones, not just to engross you personally, but also to understand the environment around you, so that it's basically as convenient a sound profile as possible. So this is a very, very advanced device, and it using a processor that it was likely used a lot like in the later stages of development. Whenever you introduce a much newer piece of hardware to something that is just coming out, that can actually introduce problems, because an M3 might not just be much faster than an M2. It could also have like things that just does differently. I'm sorry, it could have like a much upgraded CPU, a neural engine architecture, and suddenly that means another 6 months of development with like proper polishing, so there aren't any problems introduced through that new chip. Like even something silly for Apple users, right? But like think of like the efficiency course that Apple has introduced. They never obviously make any problems for us, because Apple controls the hardware, software, and services that you are using there. But on Windows, try to be a gamer and using the 12900K, the 3900K. Like, if you are actually somebody who wants the best performance, you're better off just manually turning off the efficiency cores that are on the die of your chip. Even and using fewer cores and just the high performance cores. And because of that, now anybody who doesn't do that, who still paid all the money for it, would lose like maybe 5% of performance in certain games. In some games, like even 10%. So it's really like a give and take. And if you just take out the M2 that this device has been built on, and just push in an M3 regardless, well, that's now more time for R&D. Now it's needs retooling. So, and believe me, this would make it even more expensive, because if Apple now takes like a year and a half to introduce the M3 to the next gen Apple Vision, that's great. That's a second generation product. They can learn a lot in the meantime. They can invest a lot into mass production and basically just change the motherboard and stuff like that, which obviously that stuff is like being updated basically every generation anyway when you look at iPhones, stuff like that. And suddenly you have a very good update where the software has been properly tested for it, the production has been properly tested for it. But if you just now decide to cram in an M3 that still isn't even, it exists obviously, I'm fully convinced that it's basically finished, but you cannot just ram into a device that has been in development for 5 years or something like that. So yeah, no. But again, I said I would get to it later. I got to it now, but I still think that there will be something to mention when we get to the tech specs, at least as much tech specs as Apple is currently giving us. Next, the digital crown. There isn't much to be said here. Press it to bring the home view in and turn it to control your level of immersion while using environments. Yes, that's cool. We've saw that with the mountainous backdrop. There will be other backdrops, and with collaborations, it's kind of like the Apple Watch watch faces. I fully believe that we will get stuff like Disney World being in the background, and whatever Apple also does with their flyover data that they're collecting. Maybe they will find something great to look at and then fully 3D record it. So that's great. I think it's very intuitive. Kind of makes me wish there was though a volume button, but that is also silly now because when you actually look, your full environment can now be a volume button. I hope that Apple has an easy control center, I want to say, so that it can basically take you a button tap and a swipe wherever you are, whatever you're watching, to get to control your audio and maybe even your brightness. I don't know how high dynamic range those screens are. Early rumors were pointing out to them having 5,000 nits peak brightness, which would be 600 nits when you account for some of the distortion and light loss through the lenses. But still, sometimes I think there's a good argument to control your volume manually here. Next is the overall top button. Press it to take spatial videos and spatial photos in the moment. Now, this is the one thing that MKBHD has been sort of torn on. in terms of the actual result. Because, well, you can always argue, but also with the concept, but you can always argue what this device should do, right? The core concept. But from everything that we're seeing, the screens are great, the hand and eye tracking are fantastic, the overall performance is great, like the latency is really low. Some of the experience are already really immersive, and even though the M2 is obviously not like an M2 Ultra, it's apparently still plenty powerful to deliver some great experiences. Battery life, yes, is overall like not great, but then again, this device can also be just plugged in. So if you're watching a movie, just connect it to a regular charger and don't worry about anything. Or I don't know if it just connects to a regular charger or if it becomes a charger itself. I believe that like the battery bank also connects like to Type-C somehow. So we will get to that as well. So power. Okay, so the external battery supports up to 2 hours of use and all-day use when plugged in. Now, I think a lot of people are missing the all-day use when plugged in stuff, not because some people are so opposed to it being plugged in, but because they're so used to every device that Apple is putting out, except for something like HomePods and Apple TV, to be always like self-powered, right? Like having at least some kind of battery. And I wish again there was a little bit of battery here. I think there has to be a little bit of like a redundant battery inside for like 10 minutes of use, so the device doesn't get shut off if this disconnects. Some people have complained that this is like a proprietary connector. Believe me, you don't want it to be USB-C. You want it to be magnetic and comfortable. Also, this is a device you are not taking on your holiday trip. And if you're taking in your device, you're also taking in the battery anyway. So yeah, there is zero things lost. And also, there will be like USB-C on the other end anyway. Like, I just don't know if this one just only goes to the battery or if they're like two cables. Maybe we'll find out together on the website. So this was basically the high resolution imagery that we got, but there's a lot more. And this I love. I will pause it at a good moment. Is there a good image here? Okay, so there's quality. Oh, no. I want to see them all. Okay, I have no idea why it doesn't allow me to pause. Maybe if I'm fully... Yeah, I have no idea. This is probably a problem maybe like with the latest macOS beta or Apple's website is a little bit glitchy here. So basically a 3-screen internal setup. Kind of makes me wonder like if you could have even more. But the idea basically is because each app sort of becomes its own screen, you can obviously put them right next to each other and now you're way more productive. Now you're way more immersed. And because they are so big, you can basically have them qualify as full external monitors. Now, obviously, it's not like the traditional, like, oh, desktop environment everywhere, right? When you look at like the Notes app, or like here the Messages app, it's clearly just an iPad app. So it's basically a split view, or but just with full apps, right? There's like no aspect ratio change if you don't want to. Like you can have like, this is like one app is like 16:9, the other is 4:3. So this is immersive as hell, and unlike other headsets that definitely require you to connect to something else, like sure, you can use some immersiveness from your screen, but guys, Windows still hasn't like been optimized for like gaming handhelds, even though there's like Steam Big Picture and has been around for years. Microsoft still hasn't come around to make a proper user interface that feels good on like in a 7-inch like widescreen device where you can like just find all your apps and stuff like that, all your games especially. Ironically, Windows 8 would have been really good good at it, but we know what happened there. And I think what Apple is showing off here is Apple was never like against like high productivity, like when people are saying like, oh, but look at the iPad only shows like 2 apps, and then Stage Manager came around. Oh, but Stage Manager works different than the Mac. Yes, it's not because Apple is opposed to the core concept that you see on the Mac. It's because Apple is thinking, and I am inclined to agree with them, that every device, if it is dramatically different in form factor and user interface, again, the Mac is a keyboard and trackpad / mouse environment, the iPad is a touchscreen environment, and this is a spatial environment. So there are pros and cons to each one when it comes to like how precise the input can be, how low latency the input can be. And I think Apple is doing the perfect thing here. And I love that it's powered by M2 or by an M series chip. I would love it even more if it was powered by M3, or hell, if it had like the battery and like the cooling capacity to be powered by M3 Pro, right? That would be obviously phenomenal. But we need to stay realistic here. And from every chip that currently exists and that Apple could be using, M2 is kind of the best one. As much as it sucks for guys like Vadim at MaxTech who have called it like a stopgap solution, and yet Apple has updated the entire Mac lineup with it now and made like the MacBook Air now phenomenal value again. So yeah, I never hated the M2. I have a video that is called In Defense of the M2 iPad Pro, and I could have even called this like In Defense of the M2 Apple Virtual Reality Pro. But this device is not purely defined by its one processor. But it is kind of amazing to think that the M2 allows for those kinds of experiences at like 24 megapixels. So your apps live in your space. With Vision Pro, you have an infinite canvas that transforms how you use the apps you love. Arrange apps anywhere and scale them to perfect size, making the workspace of your dreams a reality, all while staying present in the world around you. Browse the web in Safari, create a to-do list in Notes, chat in Messages, and seamlessly move between them with a glance. Now, you have to understand, immersion is key to this device. And while a lot of people would like say, oh, but like Notes and Messages, there's like no killer app here. The killer app is the immersion itself. And yes, for productivity tasks, the immersion will matter the least. But for content consumption and for more creative tasks, it will matter a whole lot. So it's similar to the Apple Watch. And while the Apple Watch, you could say like, oh, it's fitness tracking, it's its killer feature. Well, not really, given that they're like 4 times cheaper fitness trackers, and given that they're like $1,000 like watches that track even more data, that are even more durable than even like the Apple Watch Ultra, you could argue, because they don't have like much of a screen, or they cover it even more. No, the Apple Watch is like a death by 1,000 cuts. It's messages, it's audio control, it's overall notification management, like with the quickest interaction. It's fitness tracking, but then also having a screen to properly display it right there. It's all of those things coming together and then also looking good. That is its killer app. Like, similar to how like the iPhone, yes, you could argue that Safari was like its killer app, to have like a real browser in your hand, but so was a virtual keyboard that can change, especially for like multilingual people. Then the camera became a killer app once the quality was there. And think that Virtual Reality Pro, it will not have the success of the iPhone or even the Apple Watch, I believe. Like, just its core form factor is not that appealing to the masses, but for enthusiasts, I do believe that it will have a similar cumulative effect with its individual features, like the Apple Watch did, like the iPad did. But obviously, this is not an original iPhone moment, simply because the core market here is way smaller until we can get it down to basically glasses. And then, hell, we could even then use like something like an external battery, because I don't think anybody will be surprised that like small thin glasses don't have a battery inside. They're just more surprised why a headset doesn't have it. So learn more about the apps that we have. So Vision Pro has the familiar apps you know and love. Transform to live in your space, like Safari, Photos, Maps, and Messages. And with iCloud, your content is automatically synced with iPhone, iPad, and Mac. Again, that's what I've said. I do believe the user interface is well made. For anybody who is used to VR headset, you will understand why. As I've pointed out, you want as much of it to be central, easy to control basically with your eyes. And there is even this 3D effect, like when you look at Safari, not only does Safari get a little larger, but the compass elevates and separates from it, and the flower separates from the white background in the photos and stuff like that. And there is this nice shimmering effect to all of it. So and I believe this will be basically true for all of those apps. So there's a brand new app store that will launch with Vision Pro. It will feature groundbreaking apps built for Vision OS, as well as compatible iPad and iPhone apps. Now, Apple, for example, has said that there will be 100 Apple Arcade games ready for it. I do believe that this will still for example, I'm playing a game recently a lot that is called Castle Crumble, I believe. I'll try starting it and see what it's called. Yeah, it's Castle Crumble on Apple Arcade. It's great. My question is would this basically be just the iPad version blown up and optimized for hand and eye tracking controls? Or would it be more tuned to be actually placed in the 3D environment, where you just have those castles that you throw dynamite and rocks at? And that's kind of I don't know how much effort has been put into this. And then there are apps like Beat Saber, where it was rumored that it would be coming to this. But a Beat Saber is partially based on how you hold your controller. And because you are holding the controller, there is a purpose to your hands always. And you know that you're in the game. I wonder, how would you play Beat Saber on this? Would you have to point with your fingers to where that energy beam is coming from? Because I do see that there are some benefits to VR controllers, even though 90% of stuff will be better without them. But there is stuff that I still am wondering just how much can be perfectly ported from other platforms, including iOS, but also existing VR platforms like the Oculus apps, PSVR and stuff like that. So this will be very interesting to see. Next is environments. They magically transform your surroundings with stunning landscapes, letting apps grow beyond the dimension of your room and creating the perfect place to focus. Great. I hope there is a wide choice of that, even though I'm perfectly happy with just a mountainside and they're showing a desert. I want that river with the reflections when I watch the screen, a giant screen. Again, I'm not buying the first gen device now, definitely not. It's US only at launch at $3,500. It has those battery weird things. So I'm definitely waiting for a second or even a third gen product. But I think by early 2026 or maybe even as early as late 2025, I think we could have a phenomenal second generation. I don't know how large Apple will make the gaps between them. I kind of think they will be closer to 2 years, because kind of changing the production here will be expensive, and they won't be producing that many of them. So making sure they can produce one model for as long as possible will be integral to how Apple prices it, to how they plan what margins they have with the device. And as they keep selling you one device, they also build up more revenue from software and services that you consume on it. And I think that Apple will over time see that that income is also a big part that will allow them to lower the price. Vision Pro brings 3D objects to life. You can pull a 3D object out of an app and look at it from every angle as if it's right in front of your eyes. And this is where, like, for example, USDZ is like the overall like file standard for like 3D apps. Apple was integral for USDZ development, and companies like Adobe and stuff like that. Partially is like because of AR on iPhones. All of those invitations for Apple keynotes for years that have been built with AR, well, those things have also been actually kind of like revolutionary always for USDZ. They've been like incorporating new technologies like better reflections and better reaction to like environmental light. And so kind of bringing in that expertise to this, like this will be hard to match. Next, it has something to do with like the external, with like the extra monitor setup that we have seen, and partially is to use. It's hard to say. You're using the Vision Pro headset as an external monitor for your Mac, but then you're also like just taking over the Mac screen, right? So you bring your Mac wirelessly into the Vision Pro headset. You just do it by looking at the Mac, and then it takes the screen out and puts it as basically one of the apps that you have currently running on your screen. That to me is so wild and so cool, and I hope it's like really high quality and low latency. They say it becomes like a private portable 4K display. Does that mean that it like can create like a 4K 60 image even if like your Mac has like an 1800p screen? Does it really treat it more like an external like TV that you could connect it to? That sounds fantastic. Now it does have, I believe it has Wi-Fi 6E. So it would be pretty high speed peer-to-peer Wi-Fi, but then again, not every Mac even has a Wi-Fi 6E. So obviously the latest MacBook Pros have it. But even like the new MacBook Air is Wi-Fi 6. So it makes me wonder, like, will there be a noticeable difference between like what Mac do you use and later on like which Vision Pro generation do you use? Or will it be really, really good right off the gate, right? And we still also don't have overall specs, right? I mean, we do have like the overall screen pixel count, but for example, we don't have like the refresh rate. MKBHD said that it fell to him like 120 hertz. And I kind of don't see Apple doing anything less than that. But there's also like the question, is it native 120 hertz or does it use reprojection from a 60 hertz like input? Because it's obviously always powered by by the cameras and stuff like that. Are the cameras even like natively 120 FPS by themselves to feed that much data? So there's a lot I still want to know. And having those features shown off makes a lot of sense for like the general public, but I think we enthusiasts really, really want to see also some extra specs here. Now it also works with Bluetooth accessories like Magic Keyboard and Trackpad. We have seen that it can like display a virtual keyboard, which hopefully works great. But if you just want to put in your trackpad and your keyboard in front of you, it's not a traditional headset in the sense that it covers up any of your environment. It has, even like in comparison to more pass-through focused headsets, it will have like super high quality cameras and screens. So those keyboards and trackpads, they can be completely real. And I loved it. I hope that the setup is really easy. And with the M2, like really, I hope that there will be more and more apps, because it is built upon iPhone and iPad apps. And it kind of has to be. Partially because if like some people could say like, why isn't this like a fully open OS like Mac OS? Well, for one, Apple does want the software revenue coming from this. If you want any chance that this will get any substantially cheaper anytime soon, you want this to be a closed down system, because everything else will just lead to piracy, people downloading apps they have had for like 10 years, and all of that happening with like a user interface that is like completely unoptimized for this. Apple wants that whenever you use this, you're using something that works well, and that kind of has to involve you just using apps that were optimized for touch and zoom and everything else like that, that was built for a multi-touch experience. So the worst experience you will have here is like taking like an unoptimized iPhone or iPad app that just exists in like inside the 3D space as a purely like 2D canvas, but you interact with it sort of like on a whiteboard, right, where you can like still like zoom in on like those like screens that are supposed to like replace like your traditional whiteboards in classrooms. That to me will be the worst experience you can have here. But now imagine, but you still have everything you need to use it, right? Because you still have the same fingers that you control your iPad and your iPhone with. But now imagine if this was using Mac apps that are completely keyboard and trackpad dependent. And sure, it could create all of them sort of virtually, but it's simply not the same thing. So yes, I know a lot of people will be saying, oh, but if I connect it to my PC, like not it, but like any kind of headset, it fully benefits from like an open environment. As I said, Microsoft cannot even optimize for like a 7-inch handheld. How much love do you think like super niche like mixed reality headsets are getting when like Microsoft is basically shutting down HoloLens? Like, I don't know if it's like fully shut down or if they just fired half of the employees, but like, yeah, there won't be anything near the love that you're seeing here. And last but not least, when it comes to apps that are pointing out, the apps can fully expand into your room. This year it's like the mindfulness app doing like encouraging all like the breathing and the relaxing, and it can also like change your environment, either slightly darken it or basically turning it completely black, depending on the use case of the app that you're opening. And that will obviously be the defining feature of like optimized apps here. I believe that they can like dynamically basically like choose what environment they exist in, while if you display like a simple iPhone or iPad app, you will do a lot of dialing to decide like, do I want it to be with like a black environment, or do I want it in a fully just augmented real environment, or do I want it in like that fake like mountainside environment? So I think that this will be the big differentiation factor with optimized apps to like just using any kind of iPhone or iPad app from the store. Next, The ultimate theater setup, there's much to say here because we've already pointed out like the screen quality, the speakers, the compatibility even with like AirPods, which obviously can do like spatial sound, the compatibility with accessories like the Xbox or PlayStation controller, so you can control games. I do believe that Apple will not force any app to fully work with just hand controls, and that you will be able to use a controller. However, I do not think that there will be any kind of way that Apple will allow developers to mandate like, oh, we want like a PlayStation VR controller here, or we want like the latest Oculus controller here, Meta, I believe. I'm sorry, I always forget what the current name is. No, I believe it's either hands and eyes or a fully dedicated like gaming controller. And obviously with the theater setup, we've already said that you can have like a screen that's like super duper large in whatever environment you want to have. So, Vision Pro can transform any room into your own personal theater, expand your movies, shows, and games to perfect size, and you play it with spatial audio, more pixels than a 4K TV for each eye, stunning content. For example, use it on a long flight, then hopefully plug it in, or the couch at home. And again, you can also plug it in there. So then Apple is just like also trying to also push like their services, because obviously like their apps and stuff will be like optimized. So they say you can have like a 100 feet wide screen, and this is like Prehistoric Planet on like Apple TV Plus, a phenomenal show, now just had its second season. Apple will also be shooting like immersive 180 degrees video with like 3D and 8K. So I don't know, like I think they will obviously exist in like the Apple TV app, and maybe Apple will even work with like YouTube to better support stuff like that. But it's kind of, and one thing that I really want to point out, there will be 3D movies on it. Like people, I think, have largely glossed over that this will be pretty much the only way for you to use high-end contemporary technology to experience 3D like in the theater. With most TVs having dropped it, there are no 3D phones or tablets anymore. There isn't even like the Nintendo 3DS anymore. So this will be like, if you want to rewatch like Avatar 2 in 3D actually, and you don't want to like get like an 8-year-old TV that was long discontinued and its quality doesn't compare to like newer like OLED and even QLED TVs, well then now you have to use an Apple Reality Pro. Your favorite movies and TV shows from Apple TV Plus and other streaming services. Again, Apple has also said that like Disney Plus is coming, but with also general compatibility with iPhone and iPad apps, unless developers like exclude them on purpose from being used on the Vision Pro headset, similar to how like there's like no Paramount Plus app for some reason on the Mac, even though I really want to use like the good iPad app on the Mac, but they're also afraid of like piracy if they like allow an app that has download functionality into the Mac, that it will just, people will just copy and paste all content. Next is Apple Arcade. There are over 100 of your favorite iPad games, and they're also optimized with like controllers. That's great. Again, I do hope that there will be some really immersive stuff that also works really well in your environment. But here we just see like a really, really large canvas. Be in the moment all over again. I will try to make this relatively short because This is about the 3D camera functionality, and I honestly cannot say how good it is. Now, the only thing I basically heard about is that MKBHD, I'm sorry, didn't love it that much. Now, he also mentioned his bigger disc, like, even like he didn't actually criticize the quality that much. I don't want to make it sound as if he said the quality itself was trash, but like, imagine being the dad here in like those videos where you just, okay, that's cool with like panoramas and stuff. Why did we skip that? No, okay, good. So let's just expand upon this. Let's see how Apple tries to say it. Like, so you click the top button and it makes it easy to capture spatial videos and photos. And yes, this is the example, and MKBHD said that that's the video that they got to watch. And part of the criticism is not really the actual like quality of the 3D, even though it can be a little questionable, because obviously you aren't using like a 360 degrees camera rig like the Matrix did, and I don't even mean like for 3D, but like for the surround shot. But like even like newer 3D movies, there's like a lot of like post-processing to actually make them 3D. They're only obviously 3D from a certain perspective. So having like this one guy films it, granted there are a lot of cameras and they do look in a lot of directions, but it's not like he also is simultaneously standing behind them, so there is no way for him to get data on that. And then there's also like the question, are we just talking about like 3D in terms of like 3D movies, so it just looks a little more immersive, or is it like 3D sort of like creating like 3D avatars where you actually can like look at it from every angle? They are calling it spatial video, so that kind of leads me to believe that you can sort of zoom in and out because you have like that three-dimensional, or as Apple calls it, spatial data. Though I am kind of inclined to believe that this will just work well as a 3D, as like in what you experience at the cinema 3D, well, but then it will be really mediocre if you actually really try to like zoom in and stuff. And also you really don't want to be, well, you might want to take a video like this, but you don't really want to spend like your daughter's birthday like this, right, in the headset. So I don't know. This is like the one feature that I'm a little iffy on, but at least Apple has like thought of the privacy by making the screen like glow up in a special way whenever you're recording. So that's a plus. So there's incredible depth, and there apparently, I don't know, again, Apple even in their presentation has said that there's no way to like get that same feeling from a 2D video and photo, and then you can expand it. But then you can also like, what does it mean, right? When you say expanded for us on a 2D screen, that just means it's overall larger. When you expand it, does that mean that you're actually like closer and can like look a little bit around the corner at what you were sort of looking at head on while it was happening? So there's a lot that I really, really want to experience, and I hope that it like that Apple builds like virtual reality like experiences in their Apple stores at some point. Okay, now for some reason I don't know why I think that was partially here. The one thing that I do really like is this. Yes, this is panoramas. Like you just stand up and look at like a panorama that you took and it becomes like life-sized. This I 100% want to experience, like having a really high quality panorama, like something from an iPhone 14 or 15, and then like just like basically looking left and right and making that like a 30-second experience. I don't need like super long videos or anything. This to me would be already plenty expressive and immersive. Next is FaceTime. Now, obviously, it's good to have like faces directly in front of you, but and Apple calls this like connection overall. But like, what does it do with it, right? So FaceTime uses spatial audio, but let's get to this. I think that's the main point. When you set up your device, you also set up a digital persona, and it creates a 3D model of your face and like basically like a bust of you, right? And when it has those internal sensors to track where your eyes are looking, it obviously has like some understanding of like if you're smiling or not, both with its cameras, and it has like plenty sensors like through depth sensors and lidar sensors, and people on the other end will see your 3D avatar. Now this obviously looks light years ahead of like those below 2D quality like stuff that Mark Zuckerberg showed off for the metaverse. And Apple doesn't use the word metaverse. Apple doesn't even use the word AI whenever they talk about like smart features that are powered by the neural engine. They're usually using stuff like machine learning. Apple does stuff differently. Anybody who can look at this, at like the Vision Pro, and still not understand that like over a decade after Steve Jobs' death, like they've introduced the Apple Watch, AirPods, like even with like HomePod, yes, it wasn't the most successful product, but Apple thought differently than most other competitors when they were integrating those stuff. Like HomePod is arguably like the big HomePod is more popular as like an Apple TV stereo speaker set because it's so easy to integrate than the smart speaker. And even when you control it, right, you can argue, oh, Alexa or Google might have like theoretically like better sound recognition or like voice recognition, which they don't. They are smarter overall, but when it comes to actual voice recognition, Siri is pretty good, and apparently Apple is also really updating it in iOS 17. But then you also have like that absolutely unbeatable level of control right through the iPhone, where you control or your AirPlay devices. Apple still does stuff differently. They do think differently. Is it always for the better? No. Do they make mistakes like everybody else? No, they make mistakes, but they do make mistakes in a very much different way than the others. And yes, I can talk about like how much mistaken they are with the price by hurting their first gen device. But again, if they are committed to this device and they're working on a second gen product regardless of how successful or not this gen is, then I as a consumer don't care how this is priced, because if I'm not getting it, I'm not hurt by the price anyway, and then I can evaluate the second gen if it's worth it to me or not. And yes, that 3D avatar, it does look a little creepy, but it is something different. It's not even an emoji, right? A lot of people were like saying that, like, this is the problem with rumors. Whenever we see rumors, there's a lot of stuff that gets lost in translation. Some rumors coming from China. There's lost stuff from like the explanation from like a potential engineer to like a leaker who is not that well technically versed. There is a lot of stuff lost when maybe they saw something in a very early stage, right? Even like the overall device, the only leaks and renders we had of it were based on like 4-year-old data. So yes, when the rumors were saying there would be like some kind of 3D representation of your face, and everybody thought that it would be like, oh, it would be like a slightly more detailed Memoji with like a 3D aspect. It definitely wasn't that. Like, nobody expected it to be this. And yes, it does have a little bit uncanny valley, but it's FaceTime. Like, right? It's not supposed to be like the most precise representation of you. And yeah, sure, you might be using it for Zoom and WebEx as well, but I would argue, who cares at that point, right? Like, it's not like your work colleagues, like, this isn't creepy and like, and unserious, in an unserious way. It's like, oh, if you really blow up to the full screen, it's like not so great. But if you're using like that face for like a presentation, and 90% of the screen is like your PowerPoint and Keynote anyway, then who cares if there are like a little bit of uncanny valley imprecisions in there. And again, part of it is share your apps with others and use them together in FaceTime via SharePlay. You can continue to see everyone in large video while sharing the app. Cool. So it's basically a great tool for this, and you don't always have to use it. I don't for a second believe that everybody will suddenly sell off like their large TVs and their Macs for it, but if you can afford this next to all the others, Apple is doing those features about as well as they can possibly work here. And I kind of am always a little bit pissed off, and people are like, oh, this is creepy, and why would I use this if I have that? Well, because there are plenty other reasons to work this, and because you don't maybe want to change your device for the 10th time. So yeah, like, if you are in a good workflow on the VR headset, yes, you might like more how you look in like a regular FaceTime call through your iPhone or your Mac, but you are already in a headset. You might have been working on like your Keynote in there, so then just make the presentation in there. And as long as your work colleagues agree, there's no problem. It's I always like, this is my in defense part of this here. It's about as good as it can possibly work, especially with current technology. What else did you expect? Did you expect for it to have like a drone that flies around you and films your face? But now you also have the headset in front of it. So what do you do about that? Now you need AI to remove that headset. Anyway, oh God. So like, yes, I'm not much of a lover of like video conferencing in general, and Apple is rightfully covering it. I understand it. But people who are like upset about the implementation of any of this are clearly just wanting to be upset. Like, you cannot tell me that like, oh, just because the Mac is better at this one thing, even though the Mac will have worse cameras and stuff like that, like that it suddenly completely invalidates all of the other like entertainment, content consumption and creation stuff that we have seen throughout this. Oh God. It's designed by Apple, so I think we are closely coming to the end. It's the result of decades of experience designing high-performance mobile and wearable devices. It culminates in the most ambitious product that Apple has ever created. It integrates incredibly advanced tech into an elegant, compact form and results in an amazing experience every time you put it on. So, what do we have? So it's again, we are going through it. It's three-dimensional formed laminated glass and aluminum side rails here. It has a comfy, breathable like headband. It has a light seal that gently flexes to conform to your face. Oh God, I hate how unresponsive those videos are with a mouse. I will do it with the trackpad by going here. Okay, it has sound speakers that position close to your ears. Again, we've pointed out both pros and cons to that. Like obviously sound bleeding into your environment. EyeSight. There is a great name, by the way. Apple used to have EyeSight cameras with just the letter I. And yes, EyeSight, perfect name for this. With an outward displays, revealing your eyes while wearing Vision Pro, and letting others know, like, are you in an augmented reality experience? Are you in a fully immersed VR experience? There is context to this display. It doesn't just show your bored eyes whenever you are not actually looking at other people and maybe you're doing a keynote. No, this is contextual awareness for the people around you. This is not a user feature. This is a feature for those around the user. Some great pictures here. A little bit of imagery with like the 3D curved glass. I hope that the streaming quality is also good, but then again, the video will be recorded in like 2160p as it gets uploaded. So that looks good. again, learn more about the design. I think that will bring us back to those things. Oh, it's specifically about like the okay, that's good. So there is some extra info here. So the light seal right, people were saying that I remember like rumors years ago about this being modular. And people didn't quite understand what that would mean. Well, part of it is that the light seal magnetically attaches to the aluminum alloy frame. It gently flexes to conform to the individual face shapes. I'm sorry, I'm reading this in the OBS window because my TV is partially covered up by my MacBook. I still need some changes to this tech setup. But like, there will be like different like light seals, shapes and stuff for like different heads and different head sizes. So that is part of the modularity that was rumored. Next is the headband. It's 3D knitted. It creates a unique rib structure that provides cushioning, breathability, and stretch. Didn't Apple show off that this also is like because it can like disconnect from it, that you could have like different headbands theoretically? This is the one thing that I'm getting a little uncertain of, but I believe so. Next, size optical inserts so that it actually works well with your eyes. That's amazing. Now, this also, I believe, will partially limit how quickly it will roll out throughout the world, because Apple will need to have partnerships somewhat locally to ship you the right eyes. Or I don't know if like maybe like in their Chinese factory they can integrate the right away. Who knows? Though I'm kind of thinking that it is more likely, I believe. An aluminum encased battery. It can slip into your pocket. Again, like, this is why rumors suck, because you take what rumors are saying for gospel, basically, because the rumors were saying that you have like this basically a belt, like a Batman style utility belt that you would attach the battery to. And somehow, whenever I was covering those rumors, not for a second did I ask myself, wait, why wouldn't you just put it in your pocket? Like, I understand some people have like skinny jeans where this wouldn't fit, and maybe you would attach it to the belt, but like 99% will use it with the battery just in your freaking like jeans. Like this idea, or like even your sweatpants, like, I don't know why I didn't think of that, and the battery looks gorgeous. I do hope there will be like other options, and the pricing to me would be more acceptable, I would say, if Apple put in like 2 or even like 3 batteries inside, so you can swap them. That I think would actually be great value proposition here, but then again, it's still Apple. But that would be amazing if they had like 2 batteries with each device. I think that would be fantastic. Hell, maybe you could even like charge them from both sides, right? Obviously, that is now wishful thinking, because you don't want to have all those electronics doubling on each side. But yeah, it would still be cool. So Vision OS, so we can see how it's it has a lot of like translucent and transparent elements. It throws shadows. It interacts with the light. The icons are somewhat 3-dimensional. There's a lot that has gone into this. Apps can take on the entire screen, basically the entire screen, or be like just simple iPhone and iPad apps that are just like 2-dimensional canvases but encompassed in a 3-dimensional space. So and you can expand your surroundings with environments. They let you transform the space around you, so apps can extend beyond the dimensions of even your room. So here you have like that forest in the lake area. That forest will basically go even like beyond your field of vision. Go to the moon, apparently. That's cool background. So Apple has a lot of it already prepared, and I love that. So you can choose beautiful landscapes, exactly, like give it like a clear open sky. As I've said, in PSVR 2 I feel often a little cramped, somewhat claustrophobic after time. This changes that, because a little fakeness is always good. Like if you're immersed in like a game or something like that, I always like even when I watch a movie, I always like to have something that reminds me that I'm still in the real world. It gives you sort of this subconscious feeling of comfort, even though you don't actually lose any of your immersion. So this is what I really, really like, that Apple thought of that. So staying connected to the this is this is how I would say that Apple is doing it a little wrong with how they're showing this, because you see like that blue light, which obviously is the internal screen itself. Yes, it's somewhat problematic in how it looks, especially in this 2D images. I hope that before Apple comes out, maybe they can like AI correct for like those blue tints and stuff like that. But it's not bad, like it's like a ski mask, right, where you can sort of see the eyes through. So people who are saying that this is completely unworkable in a social environment, like currently, yes, but remember when original AirPods were launched, people were saying it would be completely unacceptable socially to have like toothbrushes sticking out from out your ears, and obviously we know what happened to that train of thought. So yes, I do not believe that this will be completely unacceptable, but I do believe that this has currently the largest hurdle of any like big Apple device to be fully integrated into our everyday lives. So Vision OS. You can navigate it with your eyes here. Just look at what you want to open and then click. You tap your fingers together and gently to make a selection, and gently flick to scroll. It's designed to understand hand gestures from comfortable positions. Again, that's why it has all those cameras in different directions. So this is basically eye and gesture recognition, and like hand recognition in general is important, and some other headsets are trying it too. But the gestures that you are asking of the user also need to be simple and intuitive, and they have to be somewhat like non-accidental, like you aren't clicking constantly on accident. Like imagine if you actually were like clicking on what you were looking in front of you. It would basically activate every time you move your hand in a like somewhat dramatic way. By asking that like tap your finger together gesture, that makes it far less likely that you're doing it by accident. Obviously, the microphones will support Siri. Siri will quickly open or close apps, including also media and more. And Apple will have a great accessibility, obviously from using your eyes, hands, and voice individually or in combination, because obviously for some people, they might not have a voice anymore, or they don't have... Like, I don't know how well it will work if you don't have any hands, for example, but maybe there will be some support for like an accessibility controller, while it still uses like your eye movement for a lot of the other stuff. Who knows? Maybe it could incorporate some kind of blinking control, though obviously blinking is kind of difficult in a headset where you are constantly blinking anyway. But maybe like double blinking would be like some kind of input. So let's get to the text. So that's for basically the nerdy people. I've already said how much I like a lot of it, a lot about it, how I've defended everything from like, even from like the M2, but I think we'll get to it later here, to obviously it doesn't have controllers, which I've also pointed out pros and cons about. The external eyes, I've also said my piece about that. So It's innovation you can see, hear, and feel. That's actually kind of like a downside to not having controllers, because like the PSVR 2 controllers have like great haptics, but obviously you still don't, you would rather have no controllers, I would argue. So it has a revolutionary dual chip design, which we'll get to. It has more pixels than a 4K TV to each eye, and obviously all the cameras and sensors and how it all works together. So let's get to this. So yes, it features 23 million pixel. I believe I've said like 24. It's a micro OLED. And you're viewing it through a specially designed 3-element lens. And as we've pointed out, you can also use like lens inserts to make it perfect for if you are like near or far-sighted or something like that. There's the most special spatial audio system ever. It's dual driver audio. Again, dual driver might not sound like it's like the most spatial thing ever, but don't forget that those are basically right next to your ears. If those are high quality drivers, you won't need that much more. Again, ambient spatial audio, and like even like audio ray tracing as it calculates the audio with your environmental setups. Responsive precision eye tracking. There are LEDs and infrared cameras in here. So yeah, there are like basically 4 extra cameras here. So it basically knows where you're looking. There's a sophisticated sensor array, and that is kind of insane, that system array, because you could like you could use that for like a basic like self-driving car setup. It has like more and different sensors than any Tesla now that they've like removed like radar, and they never even had LiDAR, and they removed ultrasonic sensors. This would be basically better for a car than what a lot of cars have. So it has high resolution cameras. They transmit over 1 billion pixels per second. It would actually be an interesting like calculation to make with like what frame rate they have. Like, is it like 8 megapixels at like 120 FPS, for example? The system also helps deliver precise head and hand tracking, so there is likely like some kind of gyroscope in here, or it just uses the overall movement with the data from the camera. So and there's also 3D mapping, as it has like LiDAR and true depth sensor. I wish I could click on that. Like, can I replay it fully? So there's like the system, there's like front, down, and side-facing cameras, LiDAR and true depth sensors, and then it all also works together with the internal sensors. So there's a revolutionary dual chip performance, and obviously an overall like big architectural change. The powerful M2 chip simultaneously runs Vision OS, executes advanced computer vision algorithms, and delivers stunning graphics, all with incredible efficiency. And the brand new R1 chip, so this is a dual chip design, which also obviously required like a very different motherboard design than Apple usually does. It's specifically dedicated to process input from cameras, sensors, microphones to stream images to the display within 12 milliseconds for a virtually lag-free real-time view of the world. And apparently we can also learn more. So there are LiDAR and true depth sensors. They create a fused 3D map of your surroundings. That is insane to think that it's running on like an M2 chip simultaneously with the rest of the operating system. There is a specially designed thermal system. So we haven't seen if there's like a dedicated fan, but like or if it's just like basically encouraging the system to like breathe by itself. But yeah, those intakes kind of point to there actually being a fan. And they're like infrared flood illuminators, work with external sensors to enhance hand tracking performance in low light conditions. That is very important, because low light conditions are kind of one thing where like well designed controllers would work better. Not only are they Bluetooth and they can provide their own gyroscope data, but you can also have them like be fully white, so they are better to see for the trackpad if it's still like tracking them somewhat with the camera. Obviously you cannot do that with the hands, so it's important why it has extra stuff. It's built with privacy and security in mind. I've also like quickly pointed out, there's Optic ID, that is an iris scanner that works similar to like how Face ID and Touch ID always worked, by speaking directly to the secure enclave processor. And again, like this is stuff like, sure, standalone products on the market might have that eventually, and we've had like iris scanners in like previous Samsung devices, but like this is Apple doing this. Not only will this be a high quality sensor, not only is it designed to work like really well with like everything that's powering like their Apple Silicon stuff, but it also is just yet another new biometric stuff that they had to put R&D into. And I guarantee you that Apple has put more into iris recognition research and development than Samsung did when they designed it for their Samsungs and then dropped it. So again, data is handled as much on device as possible, including everything from cameras and sensors, and even your eye input is not shared with Apple third-party apps or websites. Why is that actually important? Well, what you're looking at or not can be can define what you get to see, right? To some degree, like if you see an ad, right, a system could force you to basically look at it. So if you look away, then the ad moves alongside you. That is not why you want eye tracking. You want eye tracking to use foveated rendering. Foveated rendering is when what you look at, like in the focus of your eyes, is the most sharp on the display, so as to lessen the burden on the processing of the chip. But there were already some discussions that VR could eventually be used to like clutter up your screen with ads, and then when you have like a mandatory app, like let's say you're watching an NBA game and then there's a break, and well then suddenly you cannot look away from the ad without closing up the experience completely. So basically it's like the real thing, but then again, while you're at the game, you obviously aren't forced to look at the screens there. You can just look at the real game, or even during the break, you just talk to the people around you. But there's a reason why Apple is pointing this out. It is not too far-fetched to believe that you would be basically forced to watch ads if, like, let's then say Amazon builds like a Fire VR headset. They already have like smartphones and tablets that are cheaper because they ship ads on it that are part of the operating system. Imagine what like a VR headset like that would do. Now obviously when you pay $3,500, I don't expect the others to also do that, but the fact that Apple also obviously controls like the apps that will be on this, that also means that Apple can dictate to developers what they can do or don't with ads here. So obviously I cannot do AR here, and part of WWDC is the fact that it's obviously designed for developers. So there's like a lot of dev tools that are ready for this. Man, this is a long ass video. I'll try to just get back to the top. I don't think there's actually anything more directly on the website, because well, there is stuff like about that is coming out in early 2024, first US only and stuff like that, and there have been some answers that Apple has given to like interviewers and journalists, even stuff like what lenses will be available or won't be, right? But that's basically me being finished, because if I talk about any of that, I will have to now start looking through Twitter and stuff like that, and then we'll be here for another hour. Now, why am I making an in defense of? Because honestly, I don't want to. I wanted to make a video that is well, similar to what I did here, which is a breakdown and then giving my overall impressions. But I wanted a video that is very nuanced in having a lot of excitement, because I think this device deserves it, and then criticizing it where it deserves. And as I've said, stuff like the eyes on the front do deserve some criticism. But I've also said that I don't think the system would be better off for not having it. It could be cheaper and therefore better off, but the eyes themselves don't make the device worse, especially if you can maybe tune down the brightness to not let battery life suffer. But overall, I've also pointed out the positives of seeing those eyes, the positive of having contextual information to the outside of what you are currently doing, whether or not you're recording, for example, whether you're fully immersed, whether you're looking at somebody. I've pointed out the pros and cons of having speakers at all inside it and not relying on headphones. I've pointed out the pros and cons of being obviously lighter by not having a battery, but also that there clearly was some space that Apple could have used for batteries. I've pointed out the cons of obviously having to carry around an external battery, but also the pros of having a system that clearly encourages you to just plug in where you're watching a movie or a long game. You maybe have a favorite position on your couch that the system is basically always near to you, and that's it. And yeah, so there's a lot, and the reason why I've done this as in defense of, again, even with the M2, yes, of course, I would also want to have a more powerful M3, especially since it's coming out early 2024. But first-gen devices are known to use older processors because that's what they were developed with. There is a universe in which this device comes out 9 months before this, and maybe still uses the M1 because that was the last processor that it used in research and development. The iPhone was using a super bad Samsung chip from a set-top box, just basically something random, something at least somewhat deficient because it's ARM, right? And then even the A4 up until some later generations was using not very custom Apple SoC designs, but off the shelf what ARM was still designing. And the GPUs weren't custom Apple stuff until the A11. There's a lot that goes into making devices work, where sometimes something older or something just more tried and true or something from a competitor works better. And Apple has built the R1 chip, which is clearly new, clearly designed for efficiency while handling all that sensor input, while they needed still a generalized compute chip and something with some GPU oomph, some neural engine processing capability. And guess what? The M2 is the chip that's ready, is in good supply. Yes. Do I think that this should probably launch maybe even 3 to 6 months later, but with an M3? Maybe, but then definitely wait even longer for a second generation device that would also have other changes, a cheaper overall construction, maybe even be lighter weight by going unapologetically plastic. I made that suggestion on Twitter. So basically, this stream has now crossed 2 hours for me to say that there is an very core belief for me that this is actually a phenomenal product, and that it has, at least for me as an enthusiast, a lot of the potential that the Apple Watch had. Different potential, but a similar amount of it. For example, when I bought the original Apple Watch, I lost 40 pounds with it. So there is some things that sometimes Apple tech encourages you like nothing else really does. And I love it so much that I really hate its pricing that much, because I probably would want to be a first gen adopter. And yes, I definitely can afford a $3,500 headset, but I will not be buying a $3,500 headset, including with an M2 chip, that will definitely be surpassed very quickly by a much better second generation. And yes, I bought, for example, like the original iPad, and then I bought the iPad 2. But guess what? I then gave away my original iPad to my mom, and then my grandma used it the device was like in use for 7 years overall, I believe, like at least 6 in my family. So me upgrade, and then those devices were like $800, like because I wanted the 64 gigabyte cellular versions. So I paid $2,000, let's say, overall, with like accessories and stuff, for a first gen fully spec'd iPad and a fully spec'd iPad 2. Well, and then those devices were fully in use for years to come. Well, guess what? I cannot do that here. For one, it's $3,500 for one device. I'm definitely not buying it to immediately buy the second generation at that price, and there's also no real hand-off opportunity for me, because I cannot give it to my mom. She won't have really any use for it, and trying to sell this will probably mean that like I have to sell it for like $1,000 to $1,500 max. Like I don't see anybody paying more than $2,000 for this device after a year. And if the second generation is substantially better, hell, maybe people will want it closer to just $1,000. So in my opinion, Apple should have priced it at $2,500. At $2,500, it would have been lower than the rumored price. I think anything between $2,000 and $3,000 is still very much in this like enthusiast space, where there's like a lot of like PC gaming enthusiasts who will buy themselves like a 4090 for $1,600, a $500 CPU, a $200 motherboard. And now you are between like $2,000 and $3,000 with like storage and everything else. And I think this could have been it as well. But at $3,500, it now gets more closer to like, well, not server, but like high grade, like prosumer stuff, where it's like, no, this is the kind of money that people pay for stuff that makes them money, or for stuff that they know will last them a long while. Like I've paid like $3,600 for my MacBook Pro. That's a lot of money, but I'm keeping it for a long time, and then I'm handing it down, and so it will probably be in use in my family for a decade to like a dozen years. This definitely won't be, and that is why I'm a little discouraged by Apple's perspective on this in terms of pricing. It clearly shows to me that they really plan like a second generation device with like an iPhone 3G moment. If you remember the original iPhone, the iPhone 2G basically, like outside as an internet device, it wasn't that usable, and it came out when other devices actually had 3G or were starting to get 3G. So the iPhone 3G delivered the necessary processing improvement, and then it actually went down with the materials, right? By, for example, replacing the aluminum with plastic. And I think basically the exact same thing can happen here. Like maybe like mid 2025 we will get like an M3 version that costs $3,000, right? Which is still like 20. No, it's not like 20% off, but like it's like 13-14% less. And it's plastic, so it's lighter weight. Or hell, if they work with like the glass and maybe use like some kind of transparent plastic on the front, hell, I don't see it being then much more than $2,500. Not even because they save so much money on it, but because people will just look at it and would feel less premium. So yeah. And I wanted to make it in defense of, because I think a lot of people have taken the dislike to some individual decisions like the front-facing eyes and especially the price to downplay what this device actually is. And because I actually think that this device is great and I think it does something very new and very innovative, and it thinks outside the box where others have already boxed themselves in, even though the VR products aren't that old yet. And I'm really happy that Apple did it. And if they have like a reasonably well-priced second generation device, like I really hope that like a low enthusiast reaction from like the market for this generation won't kill their overall ambition for this device category, and eventually maybe even making like real glasses with this, because I love it. I love a lot of what they've achieved here. I hope they can keep on improving it, keep making it more affordable, and keep just pushing the envelope, because this device is the ultimate expression to me how much Apple can achieve if they really go all Apple. And yes, the price unfortunately is part of Apple's identity, with like them being used to like 40-50% margins. So yes, I love it, and I really wanted to defend some stuff that people were attacking without much context. I wanted to provide that extra context by showing you that I am reasonably well informed, as much as one can be like 12 hours later. Again, you have to count in the sleep that I had to have between that. And I've also made like a YouTube Shorts that showed my immediate reaction to this. I am getting low on energy, but I'm still so excited to see what will happen with like when real consumers can get their hands on it, even if it's just a try-on session at the Apple Store. But even when like millionaires and like just high earners get them to show how baller they are. When people like MKBHD do like really comprehensive reviews on it, I'm so excited for the future of this technology. Again, there's a reason why I bought PSVR 2, and I think that this is the logical next step from every VR and AR stuff we've had before. I think it's the first truly mixed reality headset that we have seen that does both AR and VR well. And yes, this is obviously somewhat speculative because I haven't tried it myself, but I've seen just how positive some of the early reactions are. And I really hope that people don't get all sour on this device and this category because of its launch price and because of some memes about like goofy eyes on the front. So this was MarkTech. This was my in defense of Apple Vision Pro, what is Apple's first new device category since, well, you could say probably HomePod, but I think HomePod isn't really that new. They've had speakers before that. I think since AirPods, you could say. Wait, did AirPods launch before the Apple Watch? No, AirPods launched after the Apple Watch. I think. But like we've had like those like highly portable, somewhat wearable devices, right? AirPods are like worn on your body, but then you also like transport them in your pants, and then obviously Apple Watch is like a truly wearable device. So I think that this is the ultimate culmination of how like before we get glasses, but in terms of like effort that's been put into hardware, software, how well it integrates into the ecosystem, services in terms of the support that Apple is already working on with other partners like Disney. This is amazing. And while the first generation definitely isn't for me, the overall idea definitely is, and I cannot wait for the moment when Apple puts it into a product that is more affordable to me, to the masses overall, that fixes maybe some early flaws that will come up as people start testing it, and that after a year or two also has absolutely fantastic developer support, either because the product category has completely blown up and is super popular, or because Apple put a ton of money into getting people to port their apps and features to this. So Mark Tech after a very long stream. This is me saying thank you, that I hope to see you next time, which will either be tomorrow or the day after, as I start to react to the other showings at WWDC. I'm so infinitely grateful for anybody who was there. We've had like 6 people overall at some point. I know that we will get some views afterwards. I know that we will have some great discussions on Twitter later. I love you all. I appreciate all support. As always, I also appreciate all constructive criticism, all suggestions on what you want to see next. This is Martek saying thank you, and tuning out.